So many of these journalists I have worked with. The greatest of these is M.L. Narasimha Reddy of Inadu, with whom I have toured every inch of Andhra Pradesh. Another such great journalist is with the Telegraph in Nagpur. His name is Jaideep Hardikar, who last year came out with a beautiful book, A Village Awaits Doomsday. Please read it. It's a Penguin book. It's a beautiful book on displacement. What happens to those who are displaced? It goes back to the Koyna Dam, that far back. He himself is a very young guy. He's just done a brilliant book. The other thing which I'm trying to tell you is, in that autonomy, the zones of autonomy, do you know where the sources came from when I broke the paid news story? I have about 32 kgs of paid news in my cabin. They were in my house, and then I got an ultimatum from spouse that either you take it out or I'll burn it. Do you know how I got hold of all those paid news stories which I didn't know of? Young journalists your age wrote to me anonymously, putting their lives and careers at stake. I can't read Marathi. Many of them sent from Shirdi, from Nashik, from Nagpur, from Wardha. They would cut out from their own newspapers and say, people who had never met me had no reason to trust me. Said, sir, I am so-and-so, Devendra so-and-so, working in this newspaper. We are doing paid news daily. I have done summary translation for you of this article so that you know what we are doing. Man, how good it felt to be a journalist. How good it felt. The average age of those kids sending me that from all over Maharashtra was 22, 23, 24. If I had leaked their names or not protected their anonymity, A, there would have been no story, B, their careers would be finished. But you see, there were people who thought that journalism was a calling. Now let us say, I am the biggest newspaper in India, I wish. Okay? Karan there is a middle-level corporate, like Kishore Biani once was. He was a middle-level pant retailer. That's what he was. Now, you want to break into the big league, and you figure that what you're missing out on is marketing. So you approach me. You sign a private treaty with me. Okay? That private treaty gives me 7 to 10% of the shares in your company. There is a huge conflict of interest involved. I am then covering and reporting on a company that I am part owner of. Are you any confusion here? You're clear on what the racket is? Now what happens when I enter into private treaties with 234 companies? Am I a newspaper or an equity firm? That's what the guy said honestly. You could describe us as an equity firm with substantial media interests. Now remember this. I'm the newspaper holding millions of shares. I can't then publish a story on my front page saying stock market has collapsed irreversibly. Can I do that? That's my shares. So I've got to heat the market, as Bombay's biggest newspaper did with a headline saying, what recession? Economy zooms back with 9 O's in the zoom. Then 2 great newspapers issued memos to their staff. You will not use the word recession in connection with the Indian economy. Recession is what's happening in the USA. Continued negative growth across so many quarters. What we are seeing in India is a slowdown. Don't you read that word? Economic slowdown, no crisis. Because my shares, they're already down the tube, someone will flush the tank. Okay, so I don't want that to happen. So you see what happens, guys, when I'm that invested in the market, I can never tell you the truth about it. Do you get it? It's what I call a structural compulsion to lie. You got to be kidding. I am not a supporter. I'm just telling you, as a media analyst, just look at the two phases. As long as the dharnas and the actions were against government and against babus, that was the thing. The papers were, the channels were glowing. They were, singing for them. Now when you got onto electricity tariffs and Anil Ambani is involved, you get into water where private corporations are involved. That's a whole different ball game. Right? The more corporate the media gets, the less freedom and autonomy the journalist has. Because there's not even the diversity that is allowed. In sum, what are the main features of the media as we know them today? Number one, the growing disconnect. The first characteristic of our media, the growing disconnect between mass media on the one hand and mass reality on the other. As far from the great processes of our time as we could possibly be, the largest spate of recorded suicides in human history, how much space does it get? This state has had 57,800 farmers commit suicide in 18 years, highest in the country. How much of a discussion do you see in the papers on it? You see suddenly every now and then somebody will write, suicides have fallen by half, some unnamed government official said. Yeah? But then the National Crime Records Bureau data will come and show you that Maharashtra went up by another 300. In the character of this media, in terms of corporate ownership and everything else, there is what I call the new convergence. Now this word is such a sexy word. It's all about digital platforms. Mine is a non-technology convergence. In the last 10, 15 years, it has unfolded sharply and brilliantly. The four angles of convergence are: one, media have become big business operations. Agreed? Two, big business houses have acquired media in a large buying and acquisition spree. Three, big political families have entered media in a very big way. Four, big media families have entered politics in a very big way. Please look at Dayanidhi Maran, look at Sakshi and Jagan Mohan Reddy, look at the Badals and PTV. Want me to go on? There are different forms of ownership. There is the individual. Many newspapers in India were born of an idea and 10 rupees. Somebody had an idea, he wanted to fight the British Raj, he started a newspaper, and that one day became a great paper. Indian newspapers did incredible things, like Amrita Bazar Patrika. When they were banned under the Vernacular Press Act, overnight they changed their presses and started coming out in English. When, under the Gagging Act, Indian newspapers were forbidden from writing certain kinds of articles, they would carry every article that criticized and attacked the Raj in Irish newspapers. Because under English common law, they were protected speech. Okay? So you do this, there are different forms of ownership, you try surviving amongst them. I was suggesting to him that you can try individual and you can try collectives. You can try a family thing if you want. For me, the most restrictive over a period of time is the corporate ownership. So that's how the paid news story broke. From there we got interested in who was doing, then, oh yeah, so I was at the peak of my story writing about the elections when I had a visit from 4 young media persons who were working in PR groups. They were all my former students. And came and told me, sir, you don't know nothing. So I said, what? They said, you're talking about elections and paid news. They were so junior that their job in the PR agencies was to count whether the channel had delivered the required number of seconds for the paid news. Okay? So they told me every damn thing you see on these 3 channels is paid for. And increasingly that's spreading. So I was educated by my students, as more often than not I am. Guys, Every year, don't you see the astonishing amount of coverage, less in the last two and less after 2008. But if you think back, which is the biggest economic event that gets coverage in India? The maximum coverage by the top stars. Which is that? Davos, World Economic Forum. Okay? Tell me something. Newspapers that won't spend 5,000 rupees to send a guy to cover the Marathwada drought, how do they spend 5 to 6 lakhs to send someone to cover Davos? Channels that won't do this, that won't spend a lakh to send someone to cover the Uttarakhand disaster for a few days. They hire studios. You know, Switzerland, as you know, is one of the costliest countries in the world. Davos is the costliest city in Switzerland at that time. Because, you know, anyone below the BPL, that is the billionaire permanency line, cannot get a hotel room in Davos at that time. Okay? But 200 Indian journalists are there. Where's the money from, guys?